Good morning. I'm Ann Hahn-Bayer, and I serve on the board of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. I welcome everyone to our service this morning and welcome visitors to our open and inclusive community of faith. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another as we each explore these paths. I would like to especially welcome our guests this morning and welcome again those who have visited us before. Visitors, it is the custom of our congregation to invite you to stand and give your name and where you come from, if you feel comfortable doing so. Are there any visitors who would like to introduce themselves?
I'm Rebecca. I'm actually Anna's daughter. I am visiting from Harrisonburg, where I go to college, and I actually attended the UU church down there.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm Rebecca's friend. I'm from the Boston area, but we go to school together, and I'm visiting for Thanksgiving, and I also go to a UU church there with her.
Okay. Welcome to everyone visiting today. Please join us after the service for coffee hour. We would love to have a chance to get to know you better. Our minister, Reverend Tom Capo, our congregational life coordinator, Mary Law, and all of our members are eager to meet you. Please feel free to approach anyone with a green cup with any questions you might have. Our service can be heard outside the glass doors at the back of the sanctuary. Should anyone feel the need to leave the service for any reason, there are chairs provided for your convenience.
For every person, there comes a time when they cease to be passive recipients of the traditions that their parents and teachers seek to hand on to them. When they become active participants themselves in their commitment to discovering the meaning of their heritage. Each year, I invite students to claim the traditions of Unitarian Universalism for themselves by becoming chalice lighters. These young people spend time with their parents and with each other thinking about the meaning of the flaming chalice and about the purposes and principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association. This morning, we recognize Doug Mirabali, Ben Mirabali, Ivy Suman, Trey Amwaza, Julia Wilmarth-Tyna, Ben Phillips, and Ryan Cobb-Larson, as we invite them into a more active role in the worship life of our congregation. These youth will be joining a group of their peers who will help open the service each Sunday morning by lighting the chalice for us. Today, they will light the chalice together after lighting an individual chalice and reciting the principle that they feel is especially meaningful for them. So we'll start with Ryan Cobb-Larson.
I light this flame for the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Ben Mirabali.
I light this flame for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Julia Wilmarth-Tyna.
light this flame for the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Doug Mirabali.
I light this flame for free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Ben Phillips.
I light this flame for in her worth, dignity of every person.
And Ivy Suman.
I light this flame for the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Doug, Ben, Ivy, Trey, Julia, Ben, and Ryan. We name you chalice lighters here in this congregation. Know that we rejoice in you, for you are the future of our faith. Remember, you represent the living tradition of Unitarian Universalism and strive to live with courage, honesty, and hope in all that you do. Let your heart be loving, compassionate to others, and grateful for all the world holds. Carry in your spirit the flame that you light today. May the light of truth always help you find your way. May the warmth of community nurture and restore you. And may the fire of commitment burn within you for all that is good, just, and true. Congratulations. Reverend Tom Capo, minister here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. Well, most of us will be heading to gatherings of friends and family in the next few days, sitting around a table not unlike this one, eating some of your favorite and traditional foods. And while you sit around the table, people will pause for just a few moments and begin to talk. As you and those gathered talk, stories will be shared, both the factual and maybe the not so factual. You will hear stories about your uncle's hip surgery, a cousin's first kiss or first fight. Perhaps questions will be asked about certain situations, and you'll be wanting the juicy details. And many times those around the table will not only tell you their stories, but also the meaning of their stories. Why those particular stories they're sharing are important to them, or perhaps why those particular stories should be important to you. Sharing food with people is a time of connecting more deeply with those that you love, like being able to see that aunt you've missed for so many years, and learning more about those that you love, perhaps even learning why your brother always tends to steal food off your plate. And it's a time of building traditions. Who cuts the turkey, what foods are served at Thanksgiving, who says grace, blessing the meal, and what words are used. And sometimes there are differences that exist between family and friends, and they tend to surface while you're eating. How much fun that is. When I was younger, my parents always taught me not to discuss three things at the table: money, politics, and religion. Money, because people have different amounts of it and live different lifestyles because they have more or less of it. My youngest brother, makes more money than any of us in the family. And yet he always talks about how he has no money, at which time we all roll our eyes as he continues to talk about his vacations in Spain and Greece and his frequent trips to Las Vegas where he met Lady Gaga. Politics, because even people we love, can have very different views of politics. And in this particular situation we live in today, it can be a little problematic. Earlier this year, I was visiting my best friend, and his mother shared with me that politics was tearing her family apart. Her older son voted for Trump and argues with anybody who didn't, which happens to be the rest of the family. So now they have a rule: no politics at the table. And religion, because many people, even in the same family, have very different and often passionate views about their religion, or about their spirituality, or about their ethics, or their morals. At my family's table, which I'll be sitting at in just a few days, we have some committed Catholics, several dyed-in-the-wool Lutherans, one that's going to actually become a Lutheran minister, a few Unitarian Universalists, a couple of pagans, and at least one Buddhist. And I, every year, because I'm actually presently the minister, at my table, I guess, I have to say grace without offending any of them. So today, we're going to explore the value and the consequences of sharing, not only just your religious and spiritual beliefs, but sharing with one another when gathered around the dinner table or gathered with friends and family, and when you share a little bit of what's important to you. Oh, Steve?
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me in saying our mission statement, which is printed in your order of service and projected to your left, to my left. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world If I were to walk through our backyard prairie with a cloth and just walked through all the plants, what would I end up with? Bunch of wildflower seeds. And we'd have all different kinds of seeds. And if we plant them in the ground, we'll get a wonderful variety of wildflowers. And I can imagine you know what that looks like because you've probably been here, most of you have been here, in the summer or spring or early fall, where we have just a riot of color throughout our property. And we'll have different colors and different types of flowers, and they make something special. And we could make, a bouquet out of them. And if we were artists, we could paint a beautiful picture of still life flowers. And some artists are famous for creating still life paintings. However, one Dutch artist named Vincent van Gogh wanted to do something more than paint still life. He wanted to bring more color and freedom to paintings that the artists who were famous, more color and freedom to his paintings than the artists that were famous during his lifetime. He was also a very religious man who wanted to help spread God's word to others. And maybe that's why he wanted to paint his version of Jesus' parable of the sower and the seed. Do any of you know the story of the sower and the seed? Tom, would you like to share with us the story of sower and the seed?
While Jesus was with his disciples, and he would go around teaching to crowds who came to hear him, and he often spoke in parables. A parable, if you didn't know, is not a factual story. It's a story that Jesus made up to teach a lesson. In the sower and the seed, a farmer went out to plant his garden, and he threw seeds out on the ground. As he did, some fell on the path, the hard path nearby, and birds came up and ate the seeds. Some of the seeds went on some rocks that the farmer had piled near his garden. There wasn't very much dirt on those rocks, but still the seeds sprouted. Now, seeds need dirt to grow, roots down into the ground. The roots give them water and give them nutrients. And so, as the seeds slowly began to blossom out, the afternoon sun came down. And unfortunately, what happened is that the sun beat down on those tiny little plants, and they didn't have roots for nutrients and water, and they withered and they died. Now, some of the seeds fell in among weeds and thorns that he hadn't pulled out in his garden. The thorns grew faster than the seeds, and so the seeds couldn't get enough sunlight and were choked out by the thorns. Finally, some of the seeds did get into good soil with that water and nutrients that the farmer had prepared. The seeds became plants, and they produced many vegetables.
So here is Vincent van Gogh's vision of that story. Is there anything that you notice about the artwork? Yes, Julia.
Bright and colorful.
It's bright and colorful. Any other observations? Ivy. It has a lot of blue. Well, you know what? For Van Gogh, the color yellow symbolized faith, triumph, and love, and the deep blue represented the divine. He combined these colors so that they seem to move together and show the relationship of all living things. What are the seeds that we spread? What are the seeds we spread as a church community to those beyond these walls? I believe that we spread the seeds of love and justice. In order to do this, we often need to be bold. We need to work together, and we need to keep in the front of our minds and hearts a vision of beauty and uniqueness of all people and places in this world.
Jesus and his disciples were like a family. Sometimes they would call him teacher, sometimes Abba. What does Abba mean? Well, if you were calling someone father, you might say father, but if you wanted to be more intimate, you would call them daddy. So Abba is kind of like daddy for teacher. You might be able to imagine them sitting around a table talking about this parable. Disciples wanted to know what it meant. We might even be able to imagine that Jesus replied to the story, saying, well, they were planting seeds of wisdom in our hearts and minds. We have teachers in our lives today who try to do just that. They may be Sunday school teachers here at the church, might be me as your minister, or your parents, or wise people that you know. And they might try to plant a seed of wisdom in your heart or mind using a story, maybe like a story of one of our 7 principles. And as you learn more, the seed grows, gets bigger, and you grow wiser. If you hear something, but you don't understand what the person's talking about, perhaps somebody tells you this story of the seeds and the sower. If you don't know about it, you need to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, what you hear about that story may be meaningless to you, like the seeds that fell on the path that were eaten by the birds. They would soon disappear from your mind. Now, sometimes you might hear a story or hear some wisdom, and you're excited about it initially, and you really want to share it with others, but then you don't do anything with it. You might say it to one person, but don't think about it anymore. That's kind of like the seeds on the rock that maybe they sprout a little bit, and then after a short time, because you really don't engage with them and think about them and talk about them, they just grow for a little while and then they die. What about the seeds that are choked out by the thorns? Well, this can happen when you hear a story or some wisdom, and then you get distracted. Maybe you start looking at your phone. It's easy to do in this world. Most of us are busy people. The seeds of knowledge can be planted in your hearts and mind, but get choked out by the thorns of distraction. Now, the last seed in the parable fell on the ground, which was rich soil that the farmer had prepared for it. The seeds had a chance to grow into plants, and the plants grew food that we could eat. That's the kind of thing that we hope happens in our Sunday schools here, in our adult forums as well, Science Sundays and our social justice forums. What we hope happens is that you ask questions, that you talk about what you learn with each other, that you talk about it with your family and friends, that you tell others about how great the planet is, how everyone is important, how you need to learn together, how everyone can be a good friend. You know our 7 principles. Instead of growing a real garden, you'll be helping others to know about love and peace and your values. Now, Steve and I are going to tell you some stories, 4 stories. In each of the stories, people try to spread seeds, sharing an important lesson with those they know or care about. And we'll hear what happens to each of those seeds. But before we begin the stories, we're going to take a singing break. Woohoo! So I invite you to stand in body or spirit, and we're going to sing hymn number 347 in the gray hymnal, Gather the Spirit. We're just going to sing the first 2 verses, and the words will be projected on your left.
priest shared a story with us that I have not forgotten to this day. I don't remember the purpose of the story, but it stuck with me. And I think I can apply it to the first part of the sower and the seed parable. So during a big rainstorm, the streets started to flood, and the water came up and flooded up to the houses. In one of the houses was a man who had a great faith in God and believed that God would save him from the flood. So while waiting, the flood started to grow more and more until it had reached up above the front steps. And while he was waiting, a person in a rowboat rowed up to him and said, "Would you like to hop in the boat? I can take you to safety." And the man's like, "No, no, no. I have faith in God. God is going to save me. Go ahead." Meanwhile, it's still raining and the flood's growing and growing, and the man had to go up to the second floor of his house because it had flooded the first floor. And he's sitting by the window waiting for God to come save him. And another boat comes rowing up, and the person in the boat says, "Would you like to get in the boat? I can row you to safety." "Oh, no, no, no. God is going to save me." So the guy rowed off in the rowboat and said, "Okay." Continues to rain, and it's still raining more and more. Finally, the guy had to crawl out his window up onto the roof, and he's up on the very top of the roof, and he's waiting for God to save him. And another boat motors up to him and says, "Hey, I can save you. Why don't you hop in the boat and I'll take you off to safety?" "No, no, no, no. I have faith in God. God is going to save me." It continues to rain, and the guy ends up drowning. And as the man approaches the pearly gates in heaven, he sees St. Peter and says, "Hey, I need to see God." So God comes up to him, and the man says, "I had great faith in you. I knew for sure you were going to save me." And God looks at him and says, "I sent you 3 boats." Sometimes you dismiss what is right in front of you, and the seeds are plucked off the path by birds.
Have you ever known something? I mean, really known it well, been certain you're absolutely right? Well, you're not the first. Once there were 4 princes. They were brothers. And they lived and they heard these stories about this beautiful and magnificent redbud tree, more marvelous than any other tree in the world. And they all wanted to see it. And they all wanted to see it first. So late one winter, the eldest brother was out and about. And he's in his chariot, and the little chariot driver was driving him around. And he thought, "Today's the day. I'm going to go see that redbud tree. Please take me to the redbud tree." Well, the driver gasped because he knew it was a dangerous and long journey. But he understood the boy's desire, and so he did. After they traveled a long way, the boy got out, and he saw the one tree in the forest that was different than all the other trees. But the prince was stunned and disappointed. What he saw wasn't what he expected. So he didn't say a word. Not in the forest, not when he got home. But his brothers, had they been paying attention, might have noticed that he was a little sadder than usual. A few months later, The second prince, again, he's out and about in his chariot, same chariot driver. And he told the chariot driver, "Could I go see the redbud tree?" Again, the driver gasped. He knew it was a long and difficult journey, but he agreed. And they traveled and traveled until they came to that tree, and this prince found that one tree that was different than all the others, and he was speechless. He was in awe. He couldn't sort out what to say. It was so amazing. So he didn't say anything. Had the brothers been more observant, they might have noticed that this brother was more reserved, a little more joyful in his heart and step than usual. And the third brother, a few months later, he was out and about in his chariot. Same chariot driver. And he said, "Today's the day. I'm going to go see that tree. Will you take me to the forest so I can see the redbud tree?" Well, the driver again gasped, although it's the third time now. It was a long and dangerous journey. And they got there, and the prince saw that one tree that was different than all the others. But he was unpleasantly startled by what he saw. He couldn't speak, nor did he ask any questions. And again, his brothers might have noticed, if they had been observant, that he seemed a little more bitter than usual. A few months later, the final brother went out, the youngest prince. He asked the driver of the chariot to take him to the redbud tree. By this time, the redbud tree just said, "Okay." He couldn't deny the last brother his opportunity. Again, this brother got out there, the prince, and he saw this one tree that was different than all the others. And he just started laughing. He thought it was great, and he was so delighted he couldn't stop laughing in the chariot. He couldn't stop laughing on the way home. He couldn't stop laughing when he got in the castle. He just laughed and laughed, and his brothers said, "What the heck is going on with you?" And he said to them, "The redbud tree has the most ridiculous name. There are no red buds on it. It's just black beans hanging off these dry branches. It should be called the bean tree." The elder brother said, No, you're wrong. It's so desolate with just a bare trunk and bare branches, it should be called the dead tree. And the third brother said, No, it had leaves. They looked like spinach. It'd be called the spinach tree. "Are you all blind?" said the last brother. "How could you have missed something so beautiful? The bright red blossoms are like the sunrise. The whole tree is ablaze with them. It is truly the most magnificent of trees." The young princes fell into a fierce argument. Each prince sure they knew what was right, what was true. But the king and the charioteer just smiled. You see, they knew that each had seen the tree in a different season. Now, if only those princes would stop and listen. If only they'd stop and think. Then they would agree that they'd all seen the redbud tree. But each took what they knew from their own experience, how they had seen the redbud tree. Each took what they knew and wouldn't let go of it. It was true for them. It was the shallow knowledge that they held. Just like the seeds that fell on the rocky ground whose roots would not grow, and soon they shriveled in the sun.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me in singing verses 2 and 3 of peasant farmer decided to set a trap in order to capture an animal. He dug a large hole along the path and covered it with sticks and leaves. And in the middle of the night, a fox trotted along the path and stepped onto the sticks covering the hole. And he fell straight down into it and was frantic. The fox paced back and forth and talked to himself as he strategized an escape plan. I have an idea. Here's another idea. Oh, here's another idea. Oh, I got another idea. Oh, here's an idea. Or I could do this. So that went on for a while until it was almost dawn. And he was interrupted. A crane, who had been gracefully striding along the path, also stepped onto the trap, and with a crash and a thump, also fell into the hole. Naturally, the crane was unhappy, but she was glad to be taller than the fox and to have a very long bill. She moved into one corner of the hole and began to peck the ground. The fox resumed his frantic pacing back and forth and back, but now he was bragging. I have thousands of ideas. Thousands! And the crane stared for a moment and said, I've only got one idea. And she resumed pecking at the ground. Now it was the fox's turn to stare. And he thought, what a stupid crane. Only one idea? Does she think she can dig her way out of trouble by pecking and pecking at the ground? How ridiculous. Well, the sun rose higher into the sky, and the animals heard the farmer return to the trap. Before he had removed the brush from above, the fox began to race faster and faster all around the hole. The crane barely moved. Her body slumped down into the hole that she had dug, and her head was twisted to one side along her body, and her legs outstretched stiffly into the air. She looked as though she had died of fright. When the farmer was able to see down into the hole, he roared, "You nasty fox, you're eating my bird." And he grabbed the crane by the legs and pulled her out of the hole, scolding the fox even more. And the fox was continued racing about, not sure which of the 1,000 ideas he was going to put into action. So while the farmer busied himself with trying to capture the fox, this crane stood up on her very long legs, and she implemented her one idea by spreading her wings and flying off to safety. The fox and his thousands of ideas met an outcome that was far less happy, at least for him. So like the seeds that were surrounded by weeds and thorns, the fox was so cluttered with ideas that he could not function, and all his plans to escape withered away.
There was an old man, grandfather. His wife had passed away. His son and daughter then invited him to come and move in with them. In a few years, he'd been there for a while. He'd grown more and more frail, more and more forgetful, more and more clumsy. And it was hard for his daughter-in-law. She had to see him all the time. And she already had to take care of so many things: the garden, the children, the household chores. One day it was just too much. The old man knocked over a bowl again. And not only did the soup pour out of the bowl onto the floor and onto the tablecloth and onto her beautiful embroidered cloth tablecloth. Oh my gosh, it was terrible. And then one of her finest bowls. It was one of her finest bowls, and it just shattered when it hit the floor. That night, when the grandfather sat outside, the daughter-in-law came to her husband. She just had enough. "You must carve your grandfather a wooden bowl." "A wooden bowl," he said. "I'm tired of him breaking all my good dishes. better he eats from something that isn't broken when he drops. And after that, it's just like a dam burst. And she began complaining about all these things. I'm so tired of the way he complains, and he's always here, and I always have to take care of him. He says his tea is always cold because he forgets to drink it. I'm tired of the way he changes his mind all the time. He doesn't know what to do. I'm tired of his endless chatter. He says the same things over and over again, and she just continued on and on. And it's so embarrassing when the neighbors come over. Perhaps I could set him outside when the neighbors come over. Put him a little table out there so they didn't have to see him. The man understood his wife's complaints. He too found it a little challenging to live with his father. And he was about to come up with maybe a solution or two was a little less drastic than his wife's. But we'll never know. Because at that moment, they turned and they saw their son. And he was rummaging about looking for something. The mother said, "What are you looking for, sweetie?" "Oh, I'm just looking for some wood." "What for?" "Well, I thought I'd go ahead and start carving bowls for you and Dad. I want to be ready when you get old." The boy's parents stared at the boy. The boy's parents stared at the boy for a little while, and then at each other, and then they realized they understood what they had been so wrong about. The father went outside to invite the grandfather back in for tea. The daughter-in-law set the grandfather's favorite cup and saucer out for him to drink. Yes, they were made of porcelain, but there was no more talk of a wooden bowl or putting grandfather outside. This is what it's like when the seeds are sown in fertile ground. The wisdom takes root and becomes a beautiful and healthy crop. And now we're going to have our plate collection, our offertory, and we're going to give our loose plate collection to the Ecumenical Adult Daycare. If you wish to write a check to the Ecumenical Adult Daycare, please write the check to DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church with the Ecumenical Adult Daycare in the memo line. Laura Milligan will now come forward and tell us a little bit about the program.
Thank you for having me. I come every year. It's been about 30 years so far. We are a 35-year-old organization this year. And I want to tell you, it's so nice to see your young people participating in the ceremony, and your music never disappoints. I'm always so happy to hear the music here. It's just fantastic. Our center was formed so that people that took care of a loved one, whether they be 18 or 75, had some place to take them so that they could get a break. We do take people as young as 18, and right now our oldest is 92, although we have had a 103-year-old person at the center. These are folks that can't be left alone for one reason or another. And we provide daytime care and lots of fun activities. The Unitarian Church here has been one of our founding churches. Lois Schnitzlein was on our first board of directors and helped found and fund the organization. And we have always had a very active representation from this church. So I thank you very, very much for your support. We hope to be here another 35 years or more.
The offering for this very important work in our community will now be given and received.
We like doing this song so much, we're going to do it again. And if any of you are moved by the Spirit, feel free to sing along during the choral parts. And if you don't know the words,
must have faith for these. I will stand for the truth I've seen, so this truth is seen in me. I will give from the source of love, so all that I can see is handed down for the road that's yet to be traveled on by the ones who will carry on. I'll carry on for the children of the world. They never belong in the world. They're like heaven's precious seed. And we must have faith for these. Every color far and wide. They are precious in the love tonight. With this love I've never seen. That they have a destiny, yeah, and give them the light of love to lead through the darkness around us now to a place where hope is found. For the children of the world, they and them along with him and her. They're like plants of special seed, and we must have faith for these. Every color far and wide, they're precious in the love and this love will never cease. They have no destiny for the children of the world. They and them along with him. They're the plants special seed, and we must have faith for these. Every color far and wide, they are precious in the love and this love will never cease. That they have a destiny now for the children of the world. They and them along with him. And we must have faith for these and give them the light of love to lead for the children of the world.
And now we come to the end of our service. And I encourage you to take a little risk while you're talking about things at the dinner table. Maybe share a little bit about your spirituality or your religion or your beliefs or your morals or your ethics, in hopes that the seeds you spread through your sharing will land on fertile soil. But I want to tell you one other thing. I believe that sometimes a seed lands somewhere inside a person who hears it, and it lies there hidden and protected perhaps for a long time until that person is in need of that seed. And then that wisdom sprouts and begins to grow. So, as we come together to this special bread sharing service, we had to have bread to share with you. So I'd like if a couple of the kids could come up and take the bread that's been brought today and take it out to Creeves Hall, and so that we can all share it during coffee hour. Thank you. And the rest, if you will rise, turn around and greet one another. Let us end this service by sharing our love with one another.